This little book is for anyone who is walking through a season of mental struggle or mental affliction or mental suffering, which means this book is for everyone. Hi, my name is Jared Hiebert, and this is the Here I Sit podcast. Today, we are reviewing this little book on getting out of bed, The Burden and Gift of Living by Alan Noble, published in 2021. Alan Noble knows what you are going through because he's lived it, because he is living it. He knows that there are days for some of us, almost every day, when doing the most menial, mundane, regular tasks seems so overwhelming that you can't muster the desire or energy to get out of bed and do them. This wonderful little book is for those who experience this kind of mental anguish. Noble is Associate Professor of English at Oklahoma Baptist University, and he has previously written for the Gospel Coalition. On Getting Out of Bed draws from his own experience and from the experiences of others with depression and anxiety, and he's written to help readers find ways in which they can continue to be faithful to God despite their struggles. But don't simply call these struggles mental illness. For some, that is the medical diagnosis within which they must exist. But for most of us, we deal regularly with what Noble calls mental affliction, without ever getting or needing a medical diagnosis. When Noble speaks of mental affliction, he is speaking of those moments or seasons of real mental suffering that arise out of the realities of life that all too often make living more a burden than a blessing. Those moments when we wake up in the morning with more questions about life than we have answers. Those moments when finding the drive to keep going is exceedingly difficult. Those moments when simply getting out of bed seems to be an impossible task. There are many, many perspectives on how a Christian should deal with mental affliction. Some have argued that psychological treatments, medical interventions such as medications, are inherently sinful, that they're a sign of weak Christian faith. Those people, as Noble argues, very briefly, are wrong. There are others that simply accept whatever the world of secular psychology says and accept approaches to mental health that don't fit within the biblical narrative. Those people, as Noble argues, again very briefly, are also wrong. It's not Noble's intent in this book to solve this kind of debate, or even to offer an opinion about big issues such as these, except to suggest that both sides are often too simplistic, and they don't really get to the heart of what is going on when most of us struggle. If you're looking for a good work on these kinds of issues, I'd like to recommend A Christian's Guide to Mental Illness, Answers to Common Questions by David Murray and Tom Carroll Jr. Now, this book is really a short essay. It's only 103 pages. And it's concerning how a Christian should approach moments or seasons of mental affliction. He writes, "There are rarely clear answers to depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders. You can and should pursue professional help, but remember that there are limits. And at those limits, we are thrown back on ourselves, God, and our neighbor for the responsibility of living." Noble never calls on us to pretend or to suppress our mental anguish, nor does he allow us to wallow in it or to use it as an excuse. Instead, he advocates for small but significant changes to our outlook on life, a life that needs to have God as its center. One of the qualities of this work is Noble's ability to walk the line between minimizing mental affliction without allowing us to use suffering as an excuse. For example, he writes, "If you wait until you are in a good place mentally before you accept your responsibilities, you may never act. His book holds the tension between being honest about our mental affliction while encouraging us to take the next small step to just get out of bed. His basic point is simple. Each one of us have a choice to make, regardless of what mental state we wake up to. Each and every day we must choose to live. Now that's not always an easy choice, but it is one that we must make. Why? Because our existence is good, Noble says. Our existence is good because God has created us and He has called creation good. Since God has created us and called His creation good, our only proper response is to glorify Him and enjoy Him forever. Even though we may not feel that these things are true at any given moment, we must do them as an act of obedience to God. He writes very poignantly, when we act on the goodness of creation by rising out of bed, when we take that step to the block in radical defiance of suffering and our own anxiety and depression and hopelessness with our heads held high, we honor God and His creation. And we testify to our family, to our neighbors, and to our friends of His goodness. This act is worship. But we're not only responsible to God to get up and choose life, we're responsible to our neighbors as well. We have spouses that need us. We have families that need us. We have responsibilities at work that must be met. We have Christian brothers and sisters in the church who need us. The fact that we are suffering does not allow us to disobey the command to bear others' burdens and to love our neighbors. This turn away from ourselves, this turn outward towards the needs of others prevents us from becoming overwhelmed by a self-focus that drives us ever deeper into darkness, and it opens us up to the beauty of life in community with others. It is also a witness to others that the world is good and that God is good. This simple act of living can be a great encouragement to others who are struggling. It is a witness that God is worth getting up for. In what is the heart of Noble's encouragement and challenge, he turns his attention to the gospel, to redemption as a solution to our mental affliction. Admittedly, there is not enough gospel in this work, but when Noble speaks about redemption, he is absolutely on point. He reminds us that our suffering cannot undermine God's glorious plan of redemption. Quote, because the ending is already written. You will overcome. Christ has redeemed and will glorify you, including your flawed and in some cases ill mind. In the meantime, quote, the very same God who created you in an act of grace and who preserves you in an act of grace suffered so that you can be redeemed by an act of grace, unquote. What incredible encouragement this is. This little book is for anyone who is walking through a season of mental struggle or mental affliction or mental suffering, which means this book is for everyone. Noble finds a way to put into words what most of us are feeling and thinking about life. He offers comfort in knowing that we are not alone as sufferers, as well as the needed push to get out of bed and get going. Until next time.